In a small riverside town in the United States, a single father named Daniel Harper risks his life to save a child trapped in a devastating flash flood. The dramatic rescue is caught on a neighbor's phone, spreading across the community overnight. But Daniel is not a man who seeks attention. He's quiet, hardworking, and still healing from a painful past. Next morning, he wakes to find over 200 neighbors outside his home, bringing food, blankets, and heartfelt gratitude. What begins as a simple thank you grows into an unexpected journey of community, healing, and second chances for both Daniel and the people around him. The rain had not stopped for hours, turning the streets of Riverside Creek into rushing streams. Daniel Harper tightened the straps of his warm raincoat and peered out of his kitchen window. The water had risen faster than anyone expected, spilling over the riverbank and flooding the low-lying neighborhoods. His small house perched on a thumb. Slight Hill was safe for now, but he knew families downstream were in immediate danger. The smell of wet earth and the metallic tang of the river filled the air, a constant reminder of nature's sudden fury. He heard a faint scream through the roar of the storm and instinctively ran toward the sound. Mud sucked at his boots as he waded into the floodwaters, calling out for the child he hoped to find. Then, through the sheet of rain, he spotted a small figure clinging to a fence post, eyes wide with terror and soaked to the bone. Without hesitation, Daniel dove in, gripping the trembling child and struggling against the violent current that threatened to sweep them both away. Every muscle in his body ached, but he refused to let go. Memories of losing his wife years ago, and the nights he spent worrying about his own son, fueled a determination stronger than the rising water around him. He shouted encouragement to the child, who clung to him as if Daniel were the only lifeline in the world. Each step forward felt like a battle, yet the tiny figure's trembling hands gave him courage. Finally, they reached the relative safety of a higher embankment. Daniel collapsed, soaked and shivering, but the child's grateful. Eyes met his, and for a brief moment, the storm outside seemed to fade. He wrapped the child in his raincoat, whispering reassuring words, knowing that tomorrow the town would wake to the story of what had happened tonight. But for now, there was only the quiet relief of 2 lives spared by sunrise. The rain had eased, leaving the streets slick with mud and debris. Daniel sat at his kitchen table, nursing a hot cup of coffee, the child from last night asleep on the couch wrapped in a blanket. His son, Ethan, peeked from behind the doorway, eyes wide with curiosity and pride. "Dad, you saved her?" he whispered. Daniel nodded, exhausted but quiet, avoiding the attention. He wasn't used to being a hero. He was just a man who did what he knew was right. Outside, a faint crowd had begun to gather. Word of his rescue traveled quickly through the tight-knit Riverside Creek community, mostly via messages and videos circulating on phones. Daniel felt a familiar pang of discomfort. He had always preferred the quiet life. Work at the local hardware store, dinner with Ethan, weekends fixing things around the house. Yet today, strangers were showing up at his doorstep, drawn by something extraordinary he had done without thought. A knock at the door startled him. He opened it to see Mrs. Thompson, a neighbor in her 70s, holding a steaming plate of breakfast sandwiches. "Daniel," she said, voice trembling, We all wanted to thank you. You saved a life last night. You can't just sit here alone." He shook his head gently. "I did what anyone would. I'm just glad she's safe." Still, he felt warmth spreading in his chest, a sense of connection he hadn't realized he missed. The crowd outside swelled quickly, children peering curiously, adults nodding respectfully, some wiping tears from their eyes. Daniel stepped onto the porch, hesitant, and saw over 100 faces looking at him with gratitude. The community he had quietly been part of for years now looked to him with admiration. For the first time, He felt the weight of what he had done, not as a burden, but as a bridge connecting him to everyone who had always lived near him, yet remained strangers. Daniel tried to return to his morning routine, but the constant knocking and calls from neighbors made it impossible. Plates of food, blankets, and even fresh clothes began arriving, all labeled simply, "For the hero of Riverside Creek." Daniel didn't know how to respond. He never wanted recognition, only safety for his son and those around him. But the kindness of his neighbors, tangible and overwhelming, pressed on him in a way he hadn't felt in years. Ethan, curious and wide-eyed, ran around greeting everyone who entered. "Dad, look, they all came for you." Daniel smiled, a rare moment of laughter breaking through his fatigue. He realized that his son now saw him as more than just a parent. He was a protector, someone capable of bravery in moments of fear. That small sense of pride, mirrored in Ethan's gaze, anchored him amidst the chaos outside. The local news crew arrived next, cameras capturing the crowd and Daniel's modest home. He hesitated, feeling exposed, but agreed to a brief interview, answering questions simply and truthfully. "I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because it was the right thing to do." Anyone in that situation would hope someone would help. His words resonated deeply with the community, many nodding and whispering agreements. By late afternoon, the neighborhood had organized an impromptu gathering in Daniel's front yard. Tables, chairs, and umbrellas appeared, as though magically arranged overnight. Strangers became friends, sharing stories, laughter, and even tears. Daniel watched from the porch, hands in his pockets, feeling a profound sense of belonging. That day, he realized heroism wasn't just about saving a life. It was about inspiring hope, fostering connections, and reminding everyone of the goodness that still existed. Evening fell, painting Riverside Creek in shades of amber and gray. The crowd slowly dissipated, leaving Daniel and Ethan alone for the first time since the morning. Exhaustion weighed heavily on him, but he felt something new, a gentle pride mingled with gratitude. His small home, usually quiet and routine, now carried the echoes of laughter, heartfelt conversations, and shared humanity. He cleaned the dishes while Ethan recounted every detail he could remember, his voice animated. "Dad, Mrs. Thompson said you were amazing. And Mr. Lopez brought cookies for you." Daniel chuckled quietly, savoring the simplicity of the moment. It wasn't just about recognition. It was about the ripple effect of kindness, how one action could awaken the community around him. As he tucked Ethan into bed, Daniel reflected on his life. Years of hardship, grief, and isolation had brought him to this point. Yet in one night, he had witnessed how courage could transform ordinary lives into extraordinary stories. Ethan's sleepy smile reminded him that heroism often began at home, in the care and love we extend to those closest to us. Daniel sat by the window long after the house was silent, watching the river recede beneath the moonlight. He realized that while storms could destroy, they could also reveal what truly mattered: humanity, compassion, and the bonds that tie communities together. The next morning, he would awaken to a new chapter, one where gratitude and connection reshaped not just his world, but everyone around him. By dawn, Riverside Creek buzzed with excitement. News of Daniel's bravery had spread throughout the county, and people came from nearby towns to offer support. Some brought flowers, others small gifts, and a few even handmade banners that read, "Thank you, Daniel Harper." The sight overwhelmed him, but he greeted each visitor with humility, insisting that anyone could have acted as he did. The local school principal stopped by, encouraging Daniel to speak to the children about courage and responsibility. Though hesitant, he realized it could teach lessons beyond recognition. Standing in front of a small group of wide-eyed students later that day, he shared his story, emphasizing that heroism often hides in quiet, unseen moments. The children listened, some clutching their notebooks, others whispering excitedly too. Each other inspired by his words. Meanwhile, the community's gratitude manifested in practical ways. Volunteers offered to repair damaged homes, clean debris, and deliver supplies to those most affected by the flood. Daniel, observing the cooperation, felt a profound sense of hope. He had only saved one child, but the act ignited a chain reaction of kindness, proving that one person's courage could spark collective goodwill. That evening, Daniel and Ethan sat on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the hills. They shared a quiet dinner, the hum of cicadas blending with the distant laughter of neighbors still helping one another. Daniel understood something essential. Heroism was fleeting, but the bonds forged through compassion could last a lifetime. Word of Daniel's rescue reached social media, and soon strangers from across the country sent messages of support and admiration. Daniel, unaccustomed to attention, found himself reading heartfelt stories, people sharing their own experiences of bravery and gratitude. Each message strengthened his belief that humanity's kindness was far greater than its cruelty. At the hardware store where he worked, co-workers greeted him with smiles and pats on the back. "Heard about last night," said one, handing him a cup of coffee. "You're a real hero, Daniel." He smiled quietly, brushing off the praise, but felt a swell of pride that extended beyond personal accomplishment. It was about belonging, about witnessing the quiet transformation of a town united by gratitude. Ethan, inspired by his father's actions, began helping neighbors more actively, carrying groceries, offering small chores, and learning the meaning of responsibility firsthand. Daniel watched, a mix of pride and nostalgia in his eyes, recognizing the importance of modeling courage and empathy. Through his son, he saw the ripple effect continuing, generations learning from a single act of bravery. That night, as he journaled quietly, Daniel reflected on life's unpredictability. One storm had brought fear and danger, yet also unity and hope. He understood that heroism wasn't about glory. It was about stepping forward when needed, embracing vulnerability, and fostering resilience in both oneself and others. Midweek, the town council invited Daniel to speak at a small ceremony honoring his bravery. He felt uncomfortable with formal recognition, but agreed to attend. Standing before a crowd of townspeople, officials, and journalists, he kept his words simple. "I did what anyone should," he said. "But the real heroes are the families, neighbors, and friends who show up every day for each other." The applause that followed wasn't just for him. It was for the community's shared spirit. Children from the neighborhood handed him handmade cards, expressing gratitude in messy handwriting and crayon drawings. Daniel laughed quietly, realizing that impact wasn't always measured in headlines. It was measured in hearts touched. Ethan hugged him tightly afterward, whispering, "I'm proud of you, Dad." Daniel's throat tightened, the emotional weight of the week settling over him like a gentle tide. Outside the ceremony, neighbors continued to arrive, offering meals and assistance to families still recovering from flood damage. Daniel walked among them, shaking hands, listening to stories, and offering guidance. He felt the town's pulse, its resilience, and the quiet pride of being part of something bigger than himself. As the sun set, he returned home with Ethan, exhausted yet fulfilled. Their small porch glowed in warm light, a beacon of safety and normalcy. Daniel knew this week had changed everything, not just for him, but for the entire town. Together, they had learned that even in the face of disaster, humanity's courage and kindness could shine brightest. A week after the flood, Riverside Creek slowly returned to its routine. Daniel's home, though still slightly muddy, became a hub for the community's ongoing support efforts. Volunteers gathered there to coordinate food drives, repair damaged homes, and provide assistance to those in need. Daniel, once solitary, found himself at the center, organizing schedules, offering advice, and quietly leading by example. Ethan eagerly joined him, learning lessons about empathy and responsibility in real time. "Dad, can I help Mr. Lopez with his roof today?" he asked. Daniel smiled, ruffling his son's hair. "Of course, Ethan. Let's show everyone that helping matters." That small exchange highlighted the growth not just of the town, but of the father-son bond strengthened through shared purpose. Meanwhile, Daniel received invitations to speak at neighboring towns, sharing his story to inspire others. Though hesitant, he agreed, realizing that the story's true value wasn't personal fame, but the potential to foster kindness and courage elsewhere. He felt a sense of mission, quiet and humble, yet powerful in its scope. At night, he often sat by the window, reflecting on the week. The river had calmed, the storm clouds gone, but the lessons remained. Courage, he realized, wasn't in dramatic gestures alone. It was in quiet decisions, selflessness, and the willingness to act even when fear loomed. For Daniel, the journey was just beginning. 2 weeks later, the town organized a small festival to celebrate the community's recovery. Stalls lined the streets, children laughed on the swings, and the smell of grilled food mingled with the fresh scent of the river. Daniel walked among the crowd, greeted warmly by every neighbor, a living symbol of the town's resilience. He noticed the family whose child he had saved, waving from a distance. The mother ran to him, tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "We can never repay you." Daniel shook his head, smiling softly. "Just take care of each other," he replied. That moment reminded him that heroism was never about recognition. It was about nurturing life, love, and hope. Ethan joined a group of children playing near the riverbank, laughter spilling into the air. Watching him, Daniel felt the continuity of courage, the next generation learning through example. The festival became a living testament to unity, gratitude, and the transformative power of selfless action. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light on Riverside Creek, Daniel realized that one night of bravery had reshaped his world. The storm had passed, but its lessons endured, binding a community and a family together in ways that would last forever. By the third week, Riverside Creek had fully returned to normal, yet the impact of Daniel's actions lingered. His home remained a gathering place, a hub for friendship and mutual aid. Families shared stories, meals, and laughter, building bonds that no disaster could sever. Daniel, once a solitary father, had become a quiet pillar of the community. He often reflected on the night of the flood, the fear, the adrenaline, the child's wide eyes. That single act had triggered a wave of gratitude, kindness, and unity he could never have imagined. He understood now that heroism was not a solitary endeavor. It was the spark that ignited collective goodness. Ethan, now more confident and compassionate, often helped neighbors with small tasks, inspired by his father's example. Daniel watched, heart full, knowing that courage and empathy were lessons passed down in actions, not words. Their small household had become a beacon, proof that one person's bravery could shape countless lives. As the town settled into quiet evenings, Daniel looked out at the river, calm and steady, reflecting the golden glow of the setting sun. He realized that life's storms would come again, but the bonds forged through compassion and courage would always remain, stronger than any flood, enduring in hearts and homes alike. Spring arrived in Riverside Creek, and with it, new opportunities for Daniel and his family. The riverbanks, once scarred by flooding, now bloomed with wildflowers and fresh grass. Daniel decided to organize a small cleanup drive, inviting neighbors to restore the area and make it safer for future storms. The response was overwhelming. More than 50 volunteers showed up, carrying tools, planting trees, and repairing fences. Ethan ran from group to group, helping wherever he could, his laughter echoing along the river. Daniel watched him proudly, realizing that courage and empathy were becoming ingrained in his son's character. For Daniel, it was a quiet satisfaction to see young lives shaped not by fear, but by proactive care and responsibility. The flood had given them more than a story. It had given them purpose. Among the volunteers, Daniel noticed familiar faces, families who had once been strangers now worked side by side, sharing advice, smiles, and encouragement. He felt a deep connection to the community that went beyond simple gratitude. It was a shared pride in their collective resilience. Even the local media returned, capturing the transformation and spreading a message of unity and hope. That evening, Daniel and Ethan sat on the porch, sipping warm tea. "Dad, it feels different now, doesn't it?" Ethan asked. Daniel nodded, looking out at the restored riverbanks. "Yes, son. Life feels brighter when people come together." The night sky stretched above, calm and infinite, a reminder that storms may come, but the bonds forged through courage and kindness endure. One morning, Daniel received an unexpected letter from the mayor, inviting him to speak at a regional safety and disaster preparedness seminar. Hesitant but honored, he accepted, realizing that his story could inspire others to act selflessly during crisis. He began preparing, careful to emphasize practical steps and the importance of community solidarity, rather than personal heroism. As he practiced at home, Ethan peeked into the room, curiosity gleaming in his eyes. "Will people listen to you, Dad?" he asked. Daniel smiled. "They will, son. But more importantly, they'll remember that anyone can make a difference." Ethan nodded, absorbing the lesson with the quiet seriousness only a child could. The seminar day arrived, and Daniel spoke to a room full of local officials, volunteers, and ordinary citizens. He shared the story of the flood, the rescue, and the remarkable response of Riverside Creek's community. Questions followed, discussions sparked, and Daniel realized that his experience could catalyze broader awareness, saving lives in ways he never imagined. Returning home, he felt both exhaustion and fulfillment. Ethan greeted him with a hug, and the small apartment felt warmer than ever. Daniel understood that heroism could ripple far beyond the moment of danger. Its true power lay in inspiring others to act with courage, empathy, and responsibility in their daily lives. Riverside Creek experienced a rare week of sunshine, and the community began hosting informal gatherings to celebrate their recovery. Daniel's home, now a symbol of resilience, saw neighbors sharing meals, stories, and laughter. It was a simple pleasure, yet profoundly healing after the trauma of the flood. Daniel found himself helping with logistics, organizing tables, setting up games for children, and ensuring everyone felt included. Each interaction reminded him that courage wasn't solitary. It flourished when shared. Even small acts, like helping an elderly neighbor carry groceries, became meaningful gestures of solidarity. Ethan, enthusiastic as ever, helped distribute snacks to the children, proudly telling them about his father's rescue. Daniel smiled at his son's excitement, realizing that the lessons of empathy and bravery were now embedded in the next generation. It was more than teaching. It was modeling the behavior that would carry forward into countless other moments of kindness. As the sun set behind the gentle hills, Daniel and Ethan walked along the river, reflecting on the week. The flood had changed their lives, yes, but more importantly, it had awakened a sense of purpose, connection, and hope that would guide them long after the waters receded. One evening, a local reporter visited Daniel to document the story for a feature on community heroes. Daniel was reluctant, fearing it might attract undue attention, but he agreed, hoping to highlight the collective effort of Riverside Creek rather than his individual actions. "It's not just me," he explained. "It's everyone who stepped up, who cared, who refused to let fear dictate their choices. The reporter listened intently, nodding, capturing the humility and sincerity in Daniel's words. Daniel emphasized the lessons he wanted children and adults alike to carry: awareness, preparedness, and the courage to act. He hoped that the story would serve as a blueprint for communities facing natural disasters, proving that heroism could be ordinary yet transformative. After the interview, Daniel walked through the neighborhood, noticing subtle changes. People smiled more, exchanged greetings, and helped each other spontaneously. The flood had left scars, yes, but it had also strengthened the bonds that made Riverside Creek a true community. Daniel felt pride not in recognition, but in witnessing the quiet ripple of positive change around him. That night, as he tucked Ethan into bed, the boy whispered, "Dad, I want to be like you when I grow up." Daniel hugged him tightly, feeling both humble and grateful. "You'll be better, Ethan," he replied softly. "Better because you'll always act with courage and care." A month after the flood, Riverside Creek held a volunteer fair to continue recovery efforts. Daniel and Ethan joined, working alongside neighbors to rebuild playgrounds and repair riverfront fencing. Each task brought a sense of accomplishment and unity, reinforcing the lessons learned in the storm's aftermath. Daniel noticed young families taking note of his calm, practical guidance. His quiet leadership had become a model for others how to act without panic, to prioritize safety, and to help without seeking credit. The ripple effect of a single heroic act now influenced the behavior of many. Ethan, excitedly helping neighbors carry supplies, proudly repeated stories of the rescue, emphasizing courage, empathy, and community. Daniel smiled, realizing that the story was no longer just about him. It had become a shared narrative, a living example of what ordinary people could achieve when united by compassion. That night, as the town lights glimmered across the river, Daniel reflected on the profound change within Riverside Creek. The storm had ended, but the human spirit it awakened continued to grow, stronger than any floodwaters could ever be. A surprise package arrived at Daniel's door one morning. Letter from the state governor, praising his bravery and suggesting he receive a community award. Daniel felt conflicted. He had never sought recognition, yet he understood the symbolic importance of acknowledging acts of courage. After discussing with Ethan, they decided to attend the ceremony, hoping it would inspire others. The award event was modest but meaningful, attended by local leaders, neighbors, and journalists. Daniel accepted the honor with humility, dedicating it to the families and volunteers who had worked tirelessly during the flood. His words resonated. Heroism is rarely about one person. It is about collective action, empathy, and the courage to act when it matters most. Afterward, families gathered for informal conversations, sharing experiences, challenges, and victories. Daniel felt deeply connected to each story, realizing that courage was contagious and gratitude amplified it. Riverside Creek's sense of community, once ordinary, now felt extraordinary. That night, Daniel and Ethan walked home under the stars. Ethan whispered, "I'm proud of you, Dad." Daniel smiled, feeling a quiet certainty that the lessons of the flood courage, empathy, and community would endure in his family and beyond. Spring showers returned, but Daniel no longer felt fear when hearing the rain. The storm had taught him preparedness and resilience, and he now shared that knowledge with neighbors. Together, they reinforced riverbanks, checked emergency supplies, and created community alert systems. Daniel's home became an informal hub for disaster awareness and guidance. Ethan eagerly joined the preparations, learning firsthand how to stay calm, act decisively, and help others. Daniel saw in his son the next generation of community leaders, children shaped not by fear, but by example. The bond between father and son deepened through shared purpose, and Daniel understood the lasting impact of the flood extended far beyond the immediate rescue. Meanwhile, Riverside Creek continued to grow stronger. Neighbors helped each other. Spontaneously, friendships formed and crises deepened, and a culture of preparedness and care emerged. Daniel quietly observed, proud that his actions had ignited a ripple effect of courage and empathy that transformed an entire town. As the rain pattered gently against the roof, Daniel reflected on the journey from fear to unity. Life was unpredictable, but he had learned that bravery, compassion, and connection were constants that could withstand any storm. One afternoon, Daniel received a call from a nearby town requesting guidance on flood preparedness. Hesitant, but willing, he agreed to share his experience, emphasizing that ordinary people could make extraordinary differences. He packed supplies, maps, and a notebook full of practical advice, ready to guide others toward resilience. Ethan joined him, excited to meet new people and share lessons from Riverside Creek. Their journey became a traveling example of courage in action, showing that one heroic night could ripple outward to inspire countless others. Families listened intently, asking questions and seeking advice, and Daniel's quiet humility strengthened their trust. Returning home, Daniel felt satisfaction, not in recognition, but in empowerment. The act of saving one child had evolved into something far greater, an ongoing mission to inspire courage, empathy, and preparedness in every community he touched. That night, as he tucked Ethan into bed, he realized the flood had been both a challenge and a blessing, teaching lessons that would endure for generations. Riverside Creek now thrived with renewed vigor. Community gardens flourished, children played safely along reinforced riverbanks, and neighbors shared meals weekly. Daniel, once a solitary father, became a quiet symbol of resilience, humility, and bravery. His story had shifted from an individual act to a shared narrative of collective strength. Ethan, now more confident and compassionate, guided younger children in safety drills, proudly repeating lessons learned from his father. Daniel watched, realizing the true measure of heroism was in influence how one act could shape countless others, teaching values that endure long after immediate danger passed. Evenings were calm, and Daniel often sat by the window, reflecting on the journey. The river ran peacefully, a silent testament to the storms that had come and the courage that had risen in response. Life in Riverside Creek was forever changed, not just by the flood, but by the human spirit it revealed. A year had passed since the flood, and Riverside Creek celebrated the anniversary quietly. Families gathered to remember the challenges they had overcome and to honor those who had helped. Daniel's home remained central, a place of shared stories, guidance, and community. Ethan ran through the yard with new friends, laughter echoing under the spring sun. Daniel smiled, reflecting on how a single night had transformed lives, sparked hope, and strengthened bonds. His bravery had become a catalyst for growth, teaching resilience, empathy, and unity in ways far beyond a single act of heroism. Realized that heroism was not about recognition. It was about action, impact, and the quiet courage to help when it mattered most. Riverside Creek had been shaped by one night, yet the lessons endured every day. In every neighbor's kindness, every shared meal, and every act of care. As the sun set on the anniversary, Daniel and Ethan walked along the river, hand in hand. The waters were calm, reflecting golden light, and Daniel understood fully. Storms may come, but courage, empathy, and community endure forever. Spring had fully arrived, and Riverside Creek had transformed into a vibrant, thriving town. Daniel continued to work at the hardware store, but his reputation as a quiet hero had grown far beyond his neighborhood. People approached him with stories of courage, small acts of kindness and gratitude, all inspired by his selfless rescue. Each interaction reminded him that one act could ripple endlessly. Ethan had become more responsible, helping neighbors with chores and learning practical skills. Daniel watched proudly, knowing that the lessons of bravery, empathy, and action were now part of his son's daily life. The flood's aftermath had become a living classroom, shaping the next generation through example rather than words. Neighborhood projects continued, playgrounds rebuilt, gardens planted, and streets repaired. Daniel was no longer alone in his efforts. Volunteers coordinated with him regularly, sharing ideas and responsibilities. It was a collaborative spirit that lifted the entire community, and Daniel quietly marveled at how one night had catalyzed lasting change. Not at night. Daniel often sat on the porch, reflecting on the journey from fear to unity. The river ran calmly, and the scent of fresh flowers lingered in the air. He understood that heroism wasn't just about one rescue. It was about nurturing courage, kindness, and resilience that would persist in Riverside Creek for years, too. Summer arrived, bringing long, warm days. Daniel and Ethan spent afternoons repairing fences, planting flowers, and teaching younger children practical skills. Riverside Creek had become a town defined not by its challenges, but by how it responded to them. Daniel's actions had sparked a culture of community service that now thrived. Independently, local schools invited Daniel to speak during summer programs, sharing lessons about courage and preparedness. He always emphasized that heroism was not about fame or recognition. It was about action when it mattered most. Children listened with rapt attention, some scribbling notes, others whispering excitedly to each other, inspired by real-life examples rather than stories from books. Daniel noticed that neighbors continued to support one another naturally, a habit born of shared experience and collective recovery. Families helped with errands, children played safely, and adults checked in regularly, reinforcing bonds that had been strengthened during the flood. The community had grown stronger, united not just by geography, but by shared humanity. As Daniel tucked Ethan into bed on a warm summer night, he felt a deep sense of contentment. The flood had tested their resilience, but it had also revealed the power of ordinary people acting with courage, empathy, and unwavering determination. One afternoon, Daniel received a letter from a nonprofit organization recognizing his community efforts and inviting him to speak at a national conference. Though initially hesitant, he agreed, hoping to share Riverside Creek's story and inspire others to act. He prepared carefully, focusing on practical guidance, community engagement, and the emotional lessons learned from the flood. At the conference, Daniel spoke to hundreds of attendees, sharing not only his own experience, but also the collective efforts of his neighbors. He emphasized that real heroism comes from ordinary people stepping up when it matters most, creating ripples of impact far beyond the immediate moment. Applause filled the room, but Daniel remained humble, crediting his community at every turn. Ethan watched proudly from the audience, realizing that courage and compassion were not abstract concepts, they were lived experiences. Daniel's example demonstrated that even a single night could catalyze lifelong values and inspire countless others. Returning home, Daniel felt a renewed sense of purpose. Riverside Creek had flourished, but now he also carried a responsibility to share lessons more broadly, ensuring that courage and empathy reached beyond his own town. Autumn arrived, painting Riverside Creek with shades of orange and gold. Daniel and Ethan spent weekends clearing leaves, helping elderly neighbors, and preparing homes for winter. The town had become a model of resilience and cooperation, where neighbors naturally supported each other, and small acts of kindness were a daily norm. Daniel reflected on how far they had come. The flood had revealed vulnerabilities, but also awakened strength, unity, and courage. Families shared meals, children played safely along the river, and adults volunteered freely, reinforcing the culture of care that had emerged. It was a transformation far greater than Daniel had anticipated. Ethan, now more confident, took initiative in community projects, organizing small groups of children to help with garden work and minor repairs. Daniel smiled, realizing that the lessons he had lived through were now being passed down organically. Courage and empathy were becoming part of the town's DNA. As the sun set over the river, Daniel sat quietly on the porch, feeling gratitude for the journey they had endured. The flood had tested their limits, but it had also illuminated the enduring power of human connection, leaving Riverside Creek stronger, closer, and full of hope. Winter approached, bringing frost to the riverbanks and quiet mornings. Daniel continued his routine, but also spent more time mentoring young adults in the neighborhood. He taught practical skills, safety measures, and the importance of looking out for one another. Riverside Creek had become a town where experience met preparation, and each person played a role in sustaining community resilience. Ethan eagerly joined, learning from his father while guiding younger children. The flood's lessons were no longer abstract. They were part of daily life, shaping attitudes, behavior, and relationships. Daniel felt immense pride, knowing that bravery and compassion were now being passed to the next generation. Neighbors continued to support one another, now naturally and consistently, without prompting. The flood had catalyzed a culture of empathy, teamwork, and proactive care that extended well beyond the immediate recovery period. Daniel quietly observed, proud of the sustained impact. That evening, Daniel and Ethan walked along the snowy riverbank, reflecting on how a single act of courage could ignite lasting transformation. The town was safe, resilient, and united, and it was only the beginning. Spring returned the following year, and Riverside Creek celebrated the anniversary of the flood quietly but meaningfully. Families gathered to honor the resilience and cooperation that had defined their recovery. Daniel's home remained a hub for coordination, advice, and shared meals, symbolizing community unity. Ethan organized activities for children, teaching safety skills and sharing stories about bravery and kindness. Daniel watched with pride, realizing that the ripple effect of his actions had become woven into the fabric of the town. Lessons in courage, empathy, and responsibility were now part of daily life. The town council invited Daniel to share insights during a regional meeting on disaster preparedness. He emphasized practical guidance, community engagement, and the importance of ordinary people stepping forward when needed. His story inspired other towns to adopt similar measures, spreading Riverside Creek's culture of resilience far beyond its borders. As the anniversary concluded, Daniel and Ethan walked along the river, hand in hand. The waters were calm, reflecting golden sunlight, and Daniel knew that the legacy of courage, empathy, and community would endure far into the future. By mid-year, Daniel began organizing workshops for neighboring towns, sharing Riverside Creek's experience. He focused on disaster preparedness, community cohesion, and fostering a culture of empathy. Each session drew large audiences, from local officials to everyday families, eager to learn practical skills and strategies for collective action. Ethan accompanied him, sharing stories of the flood and the community's recovery. Children listened attentively, inspired by real-life examples of courage and responsibility. Daniel felt the profound impact of one night's action. A single rescue had grown into lessons for countless others. Back home, Riverside Creek continued to thrive. Families checked in on one another regularly, neighbors collaborated effortlessly, and children learned the values of courage, empathy, and community through example rather than instruction. Daniel quietly acknowledged that the flood had reshaped not just the town, but generations to come. As Daniel sat by the river at sunset, he reflected on the extraordinary journey. A single act of bravery had sparked lasting change, proving that heroism, when grounded in humanity, could ripple endlessly. The following winter brought early snow, but Riverside Creek remained warm with community spirit. Daniel and Ethan helped distribute supplies to families in need, their actions continuing to inspire others. The flood's lessons had become a lifestyle, a commitment to preparedness, compassion, and proactive care. Local schools invited Daniel to speak regularly, turning his story into a living curriculum for students. He emphasized that heroism wasn't about recognition, but about stepping forward when needed, fostering courage and empathy in everyday life. Children listened with wide eyes, eager to emulate real examples rather than fictional tales. The town continued its tradition of small gatherings, shared meals, and volunteer projects. The culture of care had become self-sustaining, a testament to the lasting impact of one individual's courage and the collective response it inspired. Daniel, watching Ethan play in the snow, felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Riverside Creek had endured the flood, yes, but it had also grown stronger, closer, and more compassionate, leaving a legacy that would endure far beyond any storm. A year and a half after the flood, Riverside Creek had transformed into a model of resilience. Daniel's home remained central, a hub for guidance, coordination, and community activity. Families shared resources, children learned responsibility through practice, and neighbors supported each other naturally. Daniel and Ethan began documenting their experiences, creating a guidebook for disaster preparedness and community building. Their goal was to share practical advice and emotional lessons with towns across the region. The ripple effect of one heroic act had now become a blueprint for countless communities. The town celebrated quietly, honoring the people who had risen to the challenge, supporting one another with courage, empathy, and determination. Daniel realized that heroism wasn't fleeting, it was enduring, embedded in the culture of Riverside Creek. As he sat by the river with Ethan, the boy resting his head on Daniel's shoulder, he knew that the flood had changed everything, not just in their town, but in the hearts of everyone it had touched. 5 years later, Riverside Creek had grown in population, spirit, and resilience. The riverbanks were fully reinforced, the town center thrived, and families shared resources and support freely. Daniel, now recognized as a quiet pillar of the community, continued guiding others with humility and care. Ethan, now a young teenager, led safety drills, organized community projects, and inspired peers with his father's lessons. Daniel watched with pride, knowing that courage and empathy had been passed down, ensuring that Riverside Creek would remain a model of preparedness, solidarity, and humanity for generations. During the anniversary of the flood, the town gathered at the riverbank. Families, neighbors, and friends shared stories, laughter, and gratitude. Daniel spoke briefly, dedicating the celebration to collective effort. This town showed me that heroism lives in all of us, in every act of care, every helping hand, every courageous choice. Together, we rise above any storm. As the sun set, reflecting golden light on the calm river, Daniel and Ethan stood hand in hand. The flood had been a test, a challenge, and a catalyst. They had survived, grown, and flourished, leaving behind a legacy of courage, compassion, and unwavering community spirit that would endure forever.